My name is Seakga Tladi, and this is what our program sounds like today. So as usual, we're going to bring you important conversations from Southern Africa. First, we're going to start right here in South Africa, where, we're asking questions about the country's mining legacy. More than 6,000 abandoned mines exist across South Africa, and we're going to examine whether these neglected and often dangerous sites can be transformed into opportunities for economic recovery, for the preservation of South African heritage, and for community-led development through innovative research and policy. Right there, we're going to be talking to a very learned man. His name is Dr. Khodani Matshusa. And Dr. Khodani Matshusa is the first Black African scholar to earn a PhD in geoheritage and geotourism. And then, after that conversation, we're going to be moving to Zimbabwe, where the 66th Zimbabwean International Trade Fair is taking place in Bulawayo. And this fair sort of brings together government leaders, investors, manufacturers, and regional partners under the theme Connected Economies and Competitive Industries. That is the theme for this edition. We're going to be asking, how is Zimbabwe using this major platform to expand trade, to attract investment, and to strengthen industrial partnerships across the Southern African development community, and indeed the wider African market, because why not? And all of this, remember, is taking place in Zimbabwe amid sustained sanctions coming from the United States and the West. So stay tuned in. Let's get it going. We've got a bit of a crisis on our hands, across the South African landscape. So, like I said, more than 6,000 abandoned mines remain after decades of extraction of South African minerals from the ground. And many of these abandoned mines are unfenced. They are toxic. They're just dangerous environments that no people should be in. Dangerous environments that need to be made not so dangerous. Some of these pollute rivers and groundwater, and others, as we know, we've been complaining about this for a long time in South Africa, but other of these mines have become hotspots for illegal mining. They've become hotspots for crime networks, and they can be deadly. Communities living close to these mines, they often inherit the damage, while the companies that profited from these mines, they disappear. Long gone with the wind, never to be seen again. They leave an ugly scar on the South African land of an abandoned and dangerous and toxic mine. Such is the exploitation that has taken place for far too long in South Africa. But what if we thought about these mines not only as a crisis, because they are a crisis, definitely a very, very big crisis, but we need to think about them as an opportunity as well, because every crisis, at least a lot of crises, can be thought of as opportunities. So on this Netufala show, I want to discuss some pioneering research from Dr. Khodani Matshusa. He is working at the University of South Africa, and he's the first Black African scholar to earn a PhD in this field. His work sort of explores how these abandoned mines can be rehabilitated and repurposed through their restoration, through mapping them as heritage sites and developing tourism around these abandoned mines, transforming these symbols of exploitation into engines of community renewal. So, the question here is, can South Africa lead in turning our mining scars into sustainable assets? Right? So we know our mining industry helped to build the economy the way it is. A massive part of the reason that South Africa is the most industrial economy in Africa is because of the gold rush that happened here. It's because everyone came here looking for gold. There was, I forget the exact statistic. I've mentioned it in one of the previous shows, but there was a time where South Africa produced a large majority of the entire world's gold. So mining built the South African economy. All of these minerals, gold, coal, platinum, diamonds, they shaped our cities, they shaped our railways, they shaped our industrial growth. But then when many of these mines stopped becoming profitable, thousands were left behind. So according to Human Rights Watch, South Africa has more than 6,000 abandoned mines, with approximately just over 2,000 of them, I think about 2,322 of them, that are classified as high risk. And even more alarming, only 27 of these high risk mines, only 27 of them have been rehabilitated since 2009. I don't even think that is 1% or 10% yet. That is a very, very small chunk of all of the toxic mines, all of the high risk mines that we have. And this problem needs to be addressed, because this means that year after year, these dangerous sites remain open. And you wouldn't be making a mistake to ask, how is that possible? If we are truly being looked after as South African citizens, then how is it possible that year after year, all of these dangerous sites remain wide open? Now, the answer as to why it lies in weak enforcement of rules that are supposed to ensure that companies leave their mines in a way that is not dangerous. Companies are supposed to do that, but the enforcement is weak. The companies avoid it. The companies that are supposed to do it, they avoid it. And maybe we can even go back to the historic structure of the economics of extraction. I mean, for a long time, it was that simple. You come to Africa, you take, and you leave it the way it is. And the Africans will deal with whatever problems that come from their mines. But we're no longer in that day, and we cannot be in that day any longer. Mining companies are legally required to set aside money for closure and rehabilitation of mines. But in a lot of cases, and you can read this in an interview that I was reading on the Human Rights Watch website. The interview is called "How South Africa's Abandoned Mines Prey on Local Communities." And in this interview, it is mentioned that, while mining companies are legally required to set this money aside to close and rehabilitate their mines, in many cases, when mines become unprofitable, companies just, walk away. They restructure, they sell assets, and then they leave. The profits that they make, they keep, and they just leave. Whoop, bye-bye, gone with the wind. And then the cost is left with the communities. These dangers are immediate and incredibly serious. I mean, we're looking at water pollution. One of the biggest threats is acid mine drainage, right? There's those in mining who know a lot more about this, but the chemicals that are used and are created and come about as a result of the operation of mines, these chemicals are dangerous, and these chemicals can leak into water sources. When water reacts with exposed rock and mining waste, it produces acidic water that is contaminated. And then this can poison rivers, it can poison dams, it can poison our soil, groundwater. And you get a situation where communities face unsafe drinking water. And I'm not talking about a hypothetical situation. I'm talking about something that happened. We'll get deeper into the story of Carolina just now, but let's go through more of the dangers that are posed by these unclosed mines. there's also physical dangers, right? So when abandoned mine shafts are open, children can drown. Children have drowned in water-filled pits. Residents of communities, they can fall into these mine shafts, or land can collapse unexpectedly. And then also there's the problem of economic decay. When a mine closes without a plan for how to transition into the next phase of the mine, towns lose jobs. The people who used to work at the mines, now they no longer have jobs. Local businesses that were built around the mines go out of business. Infrastructure starts to decay. The money that was circulating around that mine disappears. And then finally, it's the problem we've been crying about for a long time, a problem for which we have different solutions. And this is the problem of illegal mining and organized crime, zamazamas. This abandoned mines create the perfect opportunity for illegal extraction networks, for networks of illegal mining. And then this is where the problem becomes a security problem as well as an economic problem at the same time. Because these illegal miners, they hurt the mining industry in South Africa. And the communities around illegal mining operations are also endangered because the syndicates that run these illegal mining operations, they are violent and they're very serious about maintaining their control over whatever abandoned mine they are working. So I'm sure nobody thinks that this issue is exaggerated. But for those who might think that, okay, this is maybe a bit exaggerated, let's remember Carolina in Mpumalanga. In January 2012, the water supply to Carolina became contaminated after toxic runoff linked to a surrounding coal mine entered the Bushmanspruit Dam. And this is, of course, the town's main drinking water source. The water was made toxic and unsuitable for human use. But officials were late to let residents know that. Residents went months without reliable and clean water. Human Rights Watch later stated that around 17,000 people were affected, with communities eventually having to turn to courts. And this incident in Carolina is not an accident from nowhere. It's a warning. A warning that neglected mining can become a serious danger, a public emergency. Unless action is taken, we could see another Carolina happen. We could see more children falling into abandoned mine shafts. We could see more children drowning in abandoned mines. And let's go back to the Zamazama. South Africans know this term very well. These operations are not only dangerous for the communities, but they're also dangerous for the Zamazamas themselves. For these poor citizens of the SADC region and of South Africa who are victimized by these criminal syndicates, who are sent underground into a dangerous situation where they could have tunnel collapses on them. They could be exposed to toxic gases. And the syndicates don't care about these miners because they're not paying them. They're not paying them well. They don't have to look after their safety. The violence from competing syndicates underground. Armed conflict around the mine region. Human trafficking. There's so many risks that come with illegal mining. So when we discuss abandoned mines, we're discussing an active security threat. And this is why it's important for us to be creative in our solutions to this matter. Whether we are closing these mines, whether we are rehabilitating these mines, whatever we're doing, we need to be creative about it. And then that brings me to one of the most exciting parts of the story, because at the University of South Africa, Dr. Khodani Matshusa, his work is challenging how we think about these old and abandoned mines. So instead of seeing them as a place of waste, he asks, can these spaces become sites of learning, sites of South African memory, of tourism, of community development? And how do we do this? How do we turn our minds into history? History of our labor, history of our migration, history of the communities around the mines. And I'm very excited to introduce this interview with Dr. Matshusa because he illuminated something very, very profound for me when I conducted the interview. And basically, the thought that I came to is that, it's very easy to think about the mines. Right now, we've been speaking about 6,000 abandoned mines. But we often forget that these mines are surrounded by communities. These mines are staffed by communities. And the communities around these mines, they have stories. We forget the workers who come from rural villages. We forget the women who sustain households around the mines. We forget the migrant labor hostels that pop up around these mines. We forget the music, the language, the culture that is formed in mining towns. Definitely, if we think back to the apartheid days, we think of the late, great Brahim Masekela song Stimela. The point is, for every mine, there is a story. There is some sort of a history, a people's heritage that can be preserved. And this is exactly what Dr. Matshusa's idea of how to address this problem comes in. Essentially what the good doctor is advocating for is to turn these mines into tourism sites where people can go and visit, but they must be made safe before that can happen. And this is not a pipe dream. It's not a fantasy. South Africa has examples of this. It's been done before. We just need to do it again and do it more. We've got the big hole in Kimberley. This is one of the world's most famous mining heritage sites, which was once a diamond mine, and now it's a tourist destination. There's museums around there. There's historical landmarks. You can go and learn the stories of the people who used to work on this mine. The big hole in Kimberley was dug by human beings. Massive, massive hole that was dug by human beings. And you can go and learn about these human beings. We also have Gold Reef City. This is another former gold mine which was repurposed into an entertainment complex, into an amusement parks. These examples prove that we can reimagine the landscape of a mine post active mining. Now the question is whether this can be scaled beyond just the big tourist nodes into broader community-led development across South Africa and all the abandoned mines that exist. Imagine a continental model, in fact, where abandoned mines are assessed and classified, where we can start to work together in building something new where the mines were, where we turn this liability of these abandoned mines into productivity, where we turn exploitation into opportunity. And many countries in Africa face similar problems, from the copper belt to gold zones. Mining wealth often leaves after closure, and then communities remain all over Africa. So, in pursuing ideas like the ideas of Dr. Matshusa, who is going to be explaining his ideas in more detail in an interview just now. But ideas like this, South Africa can become a pioneer in pursuing them. So, can South Africa's abandoned mines unlock new opportunities for sustainable growth? Can these forgotten mine shafts become heritage sites? Can communities that were once excluded become beneficiaries? To help us answer these questions, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Khodani Matshusa. He's a researcher at the University of South Africa and a pioneering scholar in geoheritage and geotourism. He's also recognized as an NRF-rated researcher, that is the National Research Foundation, which means, in very simple terms, that he's one of the finest researchers in our country and one of the leading voices in geology in South Africa. He is reimagining South Africa's abandoned mines. Dr. Khodani Matshusa. I wanted to have you on the show because your PhD is very, very relevant to this topic of South Africa's abandoned mines and how they can be repurposed for sustainable growth. So first and foremost, congratulations on earning your PhD. I want to start by clarifying a bit. Can you tell me a little bit about what your research was about, particularly what geoheritage and geotourism means?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Tladi, and for this invitation. It's lovely to be with you. Yes, if I could just give a brief definition of what geotourism and geoheritage is, and then I'll give you how my research links to repurposing some of the abandoned mines. When we talk of geoheritage, we are talking of elements of the earth that we value. And with this, we're talking about the rocks, the minerals, the fossils, the landscapes, the geomorphology. All these aspects, there are components that we need to value as people and as researchers and as the country as well, so that we preserve them for the future generation. Otherwise, they will be lost and then we will never recover them. And when it comes to geotourism, we're talking of the utilization of these resources. So these rocks, these minerals, these landscapes that are valuable and that have got significance. How do we use them for the employment of local people and also for geoconservation to protect them from any damages, including damage from climate change or vandalism? So geotourism helps to utilize these resources in a sustainable manner. And in terms of in South Africa, we have a lot of those sites which have got geoheritage value. I will tell you maybe more about that later. But in how my research links to repurposing of abandoned mines, I started researching abandoned mines while doing my master's at the University of Venda, where I researched the abandoned mines in the Guiana Greenstone Belt, especially the gold mines there. But then while doing that, I then moved to work on abandoned mines project in the whole country, where I did research with the Council for Geoscience and also the Department of Mineral Resources then, where I was leading the program on management of these abandoned mines in the whole country. But while doing this research, I wanted to find solutions on how we could have sustainable solutions for this abandoned, not just to rehabilitate them, because we were rehabilitating them, but I wanted to find out what else instead of just rehabilitating them and leaving them as they are, because the problem was that you rehabilitate them and then they're again being reopened perhaps by illegal miners and so forth. And then the problem persists again because these are abandoned mines with no owners and such. So my research I grew on that curiosity on how can we sustainably use these abandoned mines so that they are not continuously being used for illegal activities, and to also generate income for those local communities where they are living near these abandoned mines. Yeah.
Now, what particular problem, or what is the scope rather of the problem that you're addressing? What environmental and social damages have these mines caused, and why would this rehabilitation effort be delayed for so long amid some of these good ideas that are there, like yours?
Yes, there are a lot of problems with these sites. So they range from water pollution, acid mine drainage, air pollution, and you have land subsidence. You have also, issue of safety of people and also animals, where you find that people are fearing in their lives because they are living near these abandoned mines, because they are very dangerous places, and it's dark there, and there is a lot of illegal activities and crime and all sorts of, criminality is happening. So problems range from environmental, social, and also economic challenges in that area. Yeah, I just wanted to say, the problems are major problems, and they need to be resolved. Environmental, like I explained, water issues, whereby these mines are creating acid mine drainage and or flooding and affecting the local people there, the quality of the water there, and also the land degradation itself, soil pollution. You find that in those areas, there is even radiation, which can cause a lot of diseases for the local people, because they will be using or eating maybe plants growing in that area, and also maybe drinking that water, and also breathing that air in that area, which is very, very dangerous for their health. And why the problem has taken so long to achieve, I think the problem is big, and it needs focused and sustainable solutions. And it doesn't need stop and go. So I think perhaps also the challenge of resources to address these challenges is a big issue, which I think enough resources needs to be put together, and have a coordinated, and have a long-term vision on how we go around solving these issues. Other than that, I think the problem will still persist if we don't really have that long-term vision on how to address them.
Now, if I understand your work correctly, you sort of suggest a little bit of site restoration, but then sort of mapping these mines as heritage sites and then using them as a form of tourism. Can you maybe walk us through a practical example of how an abandoned mine can transform into this sort of economic activity? And particularly, how can this be done in a way that is community-led as well?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's very close to my heart, and because this is what I'm trying to strive to drive towards too, especially in Africa, and particularly here in South Africa, to turn around some of these abandoned mines. Even the operating mines that are still operating could be turned into something valuable, so that when we come into the future, we already have the plans for them. Not that we close the mine and then we start to think, oh, what can we use this mine for? So my research and my inclination is that you turn these abandoned mines and this mining heritage, because for me, I see it's a geomining heritage. It's a heritage that we need to preserve and also utilize for the local people. So there are various ways of doing that, and there are various examples I could give. Here in South Africa, you could look at sites like your Kimberley Big Hole. You could also look at the site in Gold Reef City. So you'll find that those were old mines, but they have been turned around for economic activities. But at the same time, addressing those issues that we talked about earlier, the environmental, the social, and also the economic issues. So by doing that, you create economic opportunities, new job opportunities, even after mining, sustainable job opportunities, whereby local people could be employed in that area and they could work as tour guides, artifacts, they could create some stuff and sell them food. So these abandoned mines could be turned around for that, and local people could generate a lot of income and sustainable income for that matter. Um, Even concept of geoparks, which is also coming along very well, although in Africa we're still battling with, especially here in South Africa. We could turn some of these which I call geo mining heritage sites, um, into sustainable livelihoods areas. So I will say that's that's how I could say those sites could be turned into. So yeah, so my solution would be to turn them into sustainable tourism geomining heritage sites.
Interesting. Particularly I mean, you make a great point in saying that, well, it's not like this is new to South Africa. We've seen it happen with Kimberley at the Big Hole. We've seen it happen with Gold Reef. And each and every place is going to have different strengths that it can highlight in its geomining heritage, if I'm putting your term correctly. Um, Now, let's look outside of South Africa for a bit. Outside of South Africa, how feasible is this model for abandoned mines in countries like Zambia, because they've got the copper belts there, or the DRC? And at regional level, would you recommend anything in terms of policy that could help to shift this process forward for the entire region?
Yeah, very, very important point. If you look at Africa, we are very blessed with mineral resources. And there is also this concept that some of these many of our mineral resources tend into case, So if you look at in those areas that you're mentioning in Zambia, in Congo, and all and other African countries with rich mineral resources, those mineral resources have turned into a case for the local communities. So my recommendation, and especially in regard with policies, is to expand this model to the whole of Africa, and to have those major mining landscapes turned into something sustainable. But of course, there need to be a will and willingness to support these initiatives, and to have investment, long-term investment, and to have them turned and into this geomining heritage, and to preserve, because most of these mines, they have very rich history. They are connected to the culture of even the local people. And people know, will tell you stories about those, how these minerals started to be mined, and how they've helped them to grow. But then, if that history is not preserved, and how the people connect with it, then it's lost. But I think it's very important that that history, geomining history, is used for the benefit of those local people, because in other regions in the global north, this is a very big market, and with very substantial income generation stream. So it's us Africans who can then take this and use it for our own benefit, not just to extract minerals and then export them, but to also use those minerals for the benefit of the local people, even after mining has ceased, because mining will not happen forever. But in terms of tourism, geotourism, these are long-term solutions that could help the people there for a very, very long time.
Yeah, you touch on an interesting point. I mean, we talk a lot and we think a lot about the mine, but sometimes we tend to forget that there's a community around that mine. There's a community with a story that is attached to that mine, and a story that can still be shared for years on after the mine. I've never thought about that perspective of the mine and the community at the mine. Can you go deeper on that a bit?
Yes, of course I can. I can give you stories and more example on that. Yeah. For example, here in in South Africa, you'll find there used to be forced labor in the mining industry. That's like more than 200 years ago. So people have been mining. Also, the big hole, for example, in the Kimberley, it was dug by people, local people, and manually digging the mine. So that's type of history that needs to be appreciated and written, and people should learn about it. And also the local people must feel proud that this is their area. And it's not just about the minerals that have been extracted, but it's also how they've also contributed to this history. And they must tell that story themselves. It must not be told by somebody else. We have the Lichtenberg diamond field in Northwest, which is now celebrating 100 years as well, whereby it's one of the areas where diamond rush happened, and local people there were employed. And there's very rich history of how local people actually contributed to the economic boom here in South Africa. So there's a lot of issues that the local people as well themselves are actually linked to the mining in South Africa. But what we find that today is that the local people are sidelined, and they tend to they don't tell their stories. Some of them, they even lose that history because those stories are not told anymore. And so my research is to link all this geological history, but also include the cultural history. That's including the local communities, even in the current mining landscapes that are happening. If you look in the Platinum Belt, in the Bushveld Complex, and the recent Marikana massacre, that's type of history that could actually be used to uplift those local communities, and those local communities should tell those stories. So that's how I'm looking at this phenomenon of geoheritage and geotourism, especially looking at the geomining heritage aspects. Yeah.
Finally, or not finally, I've still got a few more questions, but you spoke about what is needed is the will to do this. The will by our leaders, the will by the powers that be. And I guess the will of the African Union, what the African Union wants as goals for Africa going forward, it's very clear, it's written down in Agenda 2063, right? So, how does your idea line up with some of the tenets of Agenda 2063 for inclusive growth?
It aligns very well. You will have noticed that the Agenda 2063, it emphasizes the preservation actually of our own heritage. And if you link it that the preservation of our own heritage and African people telling their own stories. So if you link that to inclusive growth, if you link that to how you involve the local communities to be part of the value chain and to drive this, and for them to be the champion of this geomining heritage, it actually solves some of the issues that the Agenda 2063 is trying to achieve. And I think our research informs these regional bodies on how this can be done. I'll give you an example. There could be institutions or research community that are dedicated to do this research, but also to have practical platform support on how some of these issues can be implemented. So we have done research on how the governance aspect of it could be established in Africa, and particularly also here in South Africa. So it's up to the government institutions and also research agencies that have got enough resources and enough legal mandate to do those implementation aspect of it. But as myself as a researcher, we do the research and we influence how the policy could be driven and it could be directed at. And I think it's up to, like I said, how the regional bodies in Africa and also in the government in South Africa could take some of those recommendations and implement them.
Now, according to my understanding, you are the first Black African scholar with a PhD in this field. Can you tell me about that? And how does that feel to be sort of breaking the ground for your people?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that acknowledgement. Yeah, it feels humbling. But for me, it's also an inspiration to the young people to say, don't just do research for the sake of doing research, but do research that has an impact that will have um, influence the next generation as well. Because my thinking actually when doing this research, because I'm a geologist, but that I wanted to do something that will touch the communities, that will involve the communities, not just to mine minerals, but have the communities as well becoming part of the geology itself. So that's when I brought together the geoscience and the society and how the people can then form part of this geoscience field. So I'm humbled by the achievement, but for me, it's an inspiration of the young people to say, dream big and also think how is your research? What are you going to contribute to this generation and to the future generation as well?
Yeah, I mean, congratulations, and it is amazing to see, um, researchers that are intentional about contributing to society, about doing high impact research. And there's another thing I know is that high impact research takes time and it takes years of, putting in the work and researching. So my final question to you, and thank you so much for joining us today, is looking ahead, what are the next steps to scale your research up? And are you looking to start any sort of body that can lobby for your findings?
Yes, I'm currently involved in a number of initiatives at UNISA and also at the Geological Society of South Africa, where I'm the chair of the uh, Geoscience and Society Division, which encapsulate geoheritage. At UNISA, of course, I will continue to do the mentoring and researching on these issues, in mentoring, including the supervision of the young generation, so that they could take this, mental forward. It should not just be me. I don't want just to be myself and few other people researching it. This knowledge must be shared to everyone, especially the young generation, and to entice them that this field has got a future for them as well. And yeah, we will continue to develop some research groups within UNISA, and that's something that we are working on, and hopefully it will come to fruition. And also through the various partnership we have with our stakeholders externally, government and also private sector, to get involved in this research. While at the GSSA, we involved in a number of activities as well. We're having an online webinar where we'll be sharing some of our future endeavors that we want to do. And everybody is invited there. And all the inputs or the suggestions will be welcomed on some how we could maybe implement some of these plans that we have. But I will invite you to perhaps join on that webinar to perhaps learn on what initiatives that we are planning. But in essence, we will be creating a platform whereby all the interested stakeholders in geoheritage will form part to form so that this work is well coordinated. So we will be launching that during that webinar.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Matshusa. And I look forward to attending your webinars and seeing your plans come to fruition in South Africa one day. So thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been great to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Tladi.
I want us to turn our attention to Zimbabwe, where there is one of Southern Africa's oldest commercial gatherings that is once again taking center stage. This is the 66th Zimbabwe International Trade Fair, and it's taking place in the city of Bulawayo. And, it's bringing together all sorts of role players under the theme Connected Economies and Competitive Industries. Now, at a time where Zimbabwe continues to navigate the the long shadow of Western sanctions, limited access to international credit, and persistent efforts to reposition its economy, this year's trade fair carries significance far beyond a routine exhibition. Right? It's a statement of intent that Zimbabwe is presenting itself as open for business, open for partnership, and determined to deepen regional integration through industry, trade, and investment. We're going to be joined by Dr. Lazarus Sauti. He's actually at the fair, and I wanted to speak to him to sort of find out what is going on there from the ground. So let's get into it. The Zimbabwean International Trade Fair, known as the ZITF, is marking its 66th year, underlining a long institutional history as a meeting point between Zimbabwe's industries and the wider world. This edition in 2026 is being held from 20th to 25th of April at the Zimbabwe International Conference and Exhibition, Smart City, that's in Bulawayo, and organizers have described the event as the largest multi-sectoral trade exhibition in sub-Saharan Africa. Big claim right there. It draws exhibitors and delegates from across the continent and beyond. Participation figures indicate strong momentum, so reports suggest that 775 exhibitors have taken space this year. This includes 49 foreign exhibitors with 31 countries represented. And, this is a quite significant level of participation, especially in an era of global uncertainty and regional competition for investment. So for Zimbabwe, these numbers matter because they signal confidence in companies to come and operate in Zimbabwe. They suggest that despite the economic headwinds and geopolitical pressure that most of the global south faces these days, businesses still see value in engaging with Zimbabwe's market, with the industrial base and the strategic location of Zimbabwe. The fair is also taking place in Bulawayo, a city with enormous symbolic and economic importance. Right? It's known as Zimbabwe's industrial capital. Bulawayo has long been associated with manufacturing, engineering, textiles, and transport linkages to the wider Southern African region. So this sort of reinforces the city's identity as the center of industrial revival all the way there in Zimbabwe. But it's not merely an exhibition of products and company stands. The ZITF has also developed into a platform for policy engagements, for commercial matchmaking, and for strategizing. So alongside the main exhibition, there is a number of concurrent events that are taking place at the same time. So these include industrialization conferences, forums for investment, forums for business networking, innovation showcases, meetings between buyers and sellers, diplomatic engagements. There's a whole host of stuff that is going on, and all of it is aimed at pushing Zimbabwe's economy forward. Organizers have also highlighted events focused on rural industrialization, because that's going to be one of the keys to Zimbabwe's development, is developing the rural sector to match up with places like Bulawayo. See, these trade fairs, although we see them pop up all over the place, when used well, they can be more than a platform for companies to display products. They can be ecosystems where partnerships are formed, where supply chains are negotiated, where relationships can begin. And in many ways, Zimbabwe understands that trade and trade diplomacy requires visibility. And that's a critical point. Because when we ask ourselves, why are events like this important for Zimbabwe right now? Well, it's because Zimbabwe needs to be seen to be demonstrating capacity, to be showing its potential, to prove that it has industries that are worth partnering with. And they do. Zimbabwe needs to show its innovation, its resilience. to challenge the narratives that are perpetuated about Zimbabwe as some backwards place. That's nonsense. So trade fairs like the ZITF become part of a strategic communication of Zimbabwe's capacity. They allow Zimbabwe to shift the conversation away from sanctions and towards commerce, towards trade, away from political headlines towards Zimbabwe's industrial capabilities. And this is especially important when Africa itself is changing, when Africa itself is trying to push things like the African Continental Free Trade Area. We can't achieve goals like that without all African countries demonstrating their capacity. We need to expand our regional logistics corridors and renew our focus on connecting our economies, right? But we can only do that when there is trust among the entire region that every part of Africa can deliver. Then we can work together. And this is why the theme deserves close attention. Connected economies, competitive industries. It's a concise phrase, but it's also very, very strategic. Connected economies recognizes that no African country can industrialize in isolation. The markets are too fragmented and we need each other. Right? Zimbabwe might have one thing and Botswana has another and South Africa has another. South Africa has the ports for Zimbabwe to export its steel. Zambian minerals may connect to Zimbabwe's processing capacity. Mozambican energy infrastructure may power wider industrial corridors or the Southern African power pool. Our industrialization very much depends on the connectedness of our economies. It means seeing the SADC region not as isolated states competing against one another, but as complementary economies that are growing collectively. And then we speak about competitive industries, and this speaks to productivity. African integration can't only be political, but it must also be commercial. We need to modernize our factories across the region, improve our standards, improve our energy reliability, deepen our skills base. Products shouldn't only be competing in Zimbabwe, but in Johannesburg, in Nairobi, in London. So the challenge is not only to trade more, but to trade smarter and produce competitively. And this is where, these fairs become practical tools as well. A manufacturer might link up with a logistical partner. Lots of potential. A technology startup might meet investors. And then we must also remember the geography of Zimbabwe. That's also very strategic. It sits in the very heart of Southern Africa, connected to South Africa, Zambia, Mozambique, and Botswana. So if they can properly leverage this position, Zimbabwe can serve as a transport, manufacturing, and commercial bridge across the region. We must all pass through Zimbabwe, communicating with each other and trading with each other. The challenge really has been converting this advantageous geography for Zimbabwe into sustained economic momentum. And that's why this fair offers this recurring fair offers Zimbabwe a annual platform to translate their location into opportunity. It's also worth noting, in talking about this one, that Botswana's president, His Excellency Duma Boko, he's expected to officially open the fair in 2 days. And that reflects, how interconnected we need to be. In the interview with Lazarus Sauti, he imagines that often visiting presidents are made to open the fair just to pay an homage to the interconnectedness that is necessary for the SADC region. We really need this deeper integration as a SADC region. We see now with all the wars going on that global supply chains are vulnerable. So if we don't have each other and we're relying on all these global supply chains, we never know. We never know when the Americans could decide to start another war. And we don't have the luxury of being able to just wait it out. We have to be proactive. Zimbabwe's trade fair fits exactly into that logic. The logic that African markets need stronger internal demand, stronger regional manufacturing, and stronger cross-border investment partnerships. That is what the ZITF is attempting to facilitate. So we need to understand it as a bigger picture. It's ideally, it can be just another event, you know? But ideally, it should be Zimbabwe positioning itself for the next phase of African economic development, reasserting its industrial relevance, testing the economic coordination between SADC regions. That's what this event should mean. Now, how successfully Zimbabwe is going to apply many of these strategies and exactly what fruits come from the trade fair, what deals are being discussed, what sectors are drawing attention, we don't know that yet. We don't know that yet. And what does the atmosphere at the fair tell us about Zimbabwe's economic direction? We don't know that yet, and we're hoping it's positive answers. But to help us confront some of them, I'm going to be joined by Lazarus Sauti. He's a lecturer at the University of Zimbabwe and a political analyst, and he's currently at the fair right now. So it'll be interesting to hear from him about what's going on there. So please help me welcome to the show, Lazarus Sauti. It's always great to have you, and I wanted to speak about the Zimbabwean International Trade Fair, which is going on right now in Bulawayo, which is where you are. So first and foremost, can you tell us a bit about what's going on at the fair now and what is expected to still happen?
Okay, thank you very much. So the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair 2026 edition started yesterday officially, and currently companies or organizations are exhibiting. It's called the Exhibitors Fair, I think from Monday up to Wednesday. And from Thursday up to Saturday, the show will open for members of the public, whereby people will visit stands and they will ask different questions regarding products and services offered by exhibiting organizations. The whole idea of the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair is to enhance trade and cooperation in Zimbabwe, and mostly organizations from regional companies are also expected to exhibit at the fair, since it is a regional fair. International organizations are also expected to exhibit. So the objective is to increase trade. It is also to improve when it comes to economic diplomacy between Zimbabwe and other countries, especially in the SADC region.
Yeah, the theme of the fair is connected economies and competitive industries. How does this idea of connected economies reflect Zimbabwe's strategy to sort of counter Western sanctions through regional trade expansion?
Fantastic. So we can take this from two angles. Remember, the foreign policy direction of the government is a friend to all and enemy to none. So when it comes to connected economies, Zimbabwe is trying to enhance its relationship, bilateral relationship with different countries within and across Africa. And another thing is that Zimbabwe is riding on the African solutions to African problems mantra, whereby the government is simply saying to other countries, to other organizations, companies within the region, please come to Zimbabwe, exhibit your products, and help us to build our economies. Back to your question in relation to the issue of sanctions, you realize that since the early 2000s, Zimbabwe is under illegal sanctions, and the government is trying political, socio-economic means to shed off the impact of the sanctions and to try and improve the livelihoods of the general citizenry. So the trade fair is there to connect people to different economic opportunities and to try and stimulate economic transformation in Zimbabwe.
Now, there's over 20 countries participating, including some key partners in the SADC region. Just according to your experience there and walking around and seeing what's being exhibited, what specific regional players are showing a strong interest at the fair, and why do you think Bulawayo was chosen as the host city?
All right, let me start with your last question. So Bulawayo is the second biggest city here in Zimbabwe, and it is always framed as the industrial hub of Zimbabwe. So it is pertinent for the ZITF to be held in the city, the industrial heartbeat of the country. Then when it comes to countries that are exhibiting here in Zimbabwe or countries that are represented here in Bulawayo, we have South Africa as our biggest big brother. We have Botswana, we have Tanzania, and Malawi as well, and they have made the ZITF their permanent economic fixture, meaning they are always represented. And remember, these countries are always supporting Zimbabwe, be it in terms of politics, in terms of economics, as well as in terms of social development activities. So they are also at this year's edition to support their brother and to try and fight the impact of sanctions that are affecting the economy of the country.
Now, beyond the SADC region, how is the fair positioning Zimbabwe to tap into wider African markets, perhaps through the African Continental Free Trade Area or partnerships in East Africa?
Fantastic. So you realize that Belarus is always exhibiting at the ZITF. I think this year is their third exhibition. And we also have countries that are also represented through inter-state organizations. For instance, the UNDP is exhibiting at this year's Zimbabwe International Trade Fair, and the UNDP is an organ or an organization that supports United Nations peace and security activities. Their presence is of paramount importance, especially in solidifying the socio-economic direction of the trade fair.
Now, we often see pledges for investment and partnerships at events like these. If any, are there any agreements that have already been done or that are in the works that you can highlight that have been announced so far, and their potential impact on Zimbabwe's industrial revival?
I've not heard of any agreement so far. Maybe it's because His Excellency is expected to be in Bulawayo on Thursday or Friday when the fair will be officially opened or launched. So maybe all political activities or major socio-economic activities, deals will be signed on that day. But at the moment, as I said, organizations, companies from various regions, various countries are exhibiting and they are showcasing their products and services.
Now, by when you say His Excellency, you mean the president over in Botswana, Duma Boko, His Excellency Duma Boko. And um, what is the significance of having this fair being opened and keynoted by a visiting president?
Well, for the past years, the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair, as well as the Zimbabwe Agricultural Show, are opened by visiting presidents. And the idea is to show solidarity, the big brother mentality in Africa. Remember, we are driven by the Ubuntu philosophy, whereby presidents from other African countries will come and show their support to Zimbabwe, and this positions Zimbabwe as a key player and a very good neighbor to regional countries or regional partners. And another thing is that the move shows the unity within the SADC region when it comes to these activities, and when it comes to the official launch of these activities by visiting presidents. The message being disseminated is clear. We are one as a region, and we are simply speaking with one voice. The only difference is that they are speaking with that voice in Zimbabwe, but the voice is being amplified to all other countries that are within the SADC region, as well as the African Union as the continental motherboard.
Yeah, I guess it's like two pillars, the pillar of solidarity in Africa and as a region, and then the pillar of trade as a vehicle to stimulate economic growth. And it seems to me like that is what this fair is based on. Is that an accurate assessment? And can you dive a bit deeper into that? It seems to me is that this fair relies on two pillars. It's the pillar of collaboration and solidarity as a region, as well as trade as a vehicle of driving economic growth. So, can you speak to me about the relationship between these two and just unpack that dynamic?
Okay, fantastic. So there is a close relationship between politics and economics. And when it comes to the political economy of development, not only in Zimbabwe, but in other parts of the world, you realize that good policies, political policies, or social policies, as well as economic policies drive sustainable development. So the whole idea now when it comes to the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair is to use the platform as an economic hub to drive policies that stimulate development, be it in terms of employment creation, in terms of access to goods and services, as well as in terms of collaborations, not only between companies, but also between countries, between cities. We always expect relationships between cities here in Zimbabwe and cities in other parts of Southern Africa, maybe in terms of stimulating agricultural activities, joint ventures in mining, as well as other activities. So there is a close relationship between politics and economics. And what is simply happening in Bulawayo is that economics is being used.
I've got a final question. Is that, what's the role of BRICS? Just according to your experience there walking around, what is the participation looking like from countries that are coming from the BRICS bloc? And why is it important for the BRICS bloc to especially collaborate on initiatives like this?
Okay, thank you. So when it comes to countries from BRICS, here in Zimbabwe, we have companies that are operated by Indians, and we have organizations that are also operated by South Africans. China is one of our key partners also. Is represented here. So we have organizations from India, we have organizations from China, from South Africa. I will try to look around and check whether we have organizations from Brazil and Russia. But the bottom line is we are equally represented when it comes to the BRICS representation, and the ZITF is proving to be a decolonial move now, whereby Zimbabwe and the BRICS partners are simply saying together we can join hands and fight all the problems that are stalling development in this country. We can also have key partnerships within and across Southern Africa, and these key partners are driven by BRICS countries. I understand that during our previous exhibitions, we had countries from Russia, and of course, because Russia is a key player when it comes to mining here in Zimbabwe, and we have so many companies that are representing the mining sector, then I can safely conclude that Russia is also ably represented. So the BRICS bloc is here represented, and I think it's good for the economic drive that is being pushed by the government of Zimbabwe.
Now we are bringing the show to a close. We've had a good time talking about Zimbabwe and the Zimbabwean International Trade Fair as being, more than an event, but a strategic opportunity for Zimbabwe in terms of growing its trade. And I think we should leave it by emphasizing the theme, right? Connected economies, competitive industries. That's the goal, not only for Zimbabwe, but for the wider SADC region, for the entirety of Africa. We had a conversation right there with Lazarus Sauti from the University of Zimbabwe. And just before that, we're speaking about one of the biggest problems plaguing South Africa today, and it is all the abandoned mines that are in our country. And all the problems they cause, like the problem of illegal mining that has been decried endlessly in South Africa. We've invited onto the show Dr. Khodani Matshusa, because he's got an innovative idea as to how we deal with this. His idea, as he mentioned in his interview, is to turn them into heritage sites. And this has been done before. Just needs to be done more. So that is all I have for you for today. But I will be back at another time, same place. For today, I have been Seakga Tladi, and I'm out of here.